I'll never forget the moment my entire world shifted on its axis. It was Christmas Eve, and the dining room of my Connecticut estate glowed with candlelight and fresh pine garland. I'd spent all afternoon preparing the table, my grandmother's white linen tablecloth, the good china with the gold trim, crystal wine glasses that caught the light like tiny prisms. The table was set for 12, though I'd soon discover why half those seats would remain conspicuously empty. My son Brandon sat directly across from me, his fiancée Victoria, Tori, as she insisted everyone call her, perched beside him in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. That practiced smile was plastered on her face, the one I'd been trying so hard to like for the past 6 months. The turkey had just been carved, the wine poured into everyone's glasses, and I was about to propose a toast when she said it. "Mrs. Hartwell," Tori announced, her voice carrying through the room loud enough that even the servers in the hallway must have heard. "As your son's fiancée, I want you to know that I'll permit your husband to work at my family's company after we take over Hartwell Industries." The room went dead silent. I felt my face freeze mid-smile, the wine glass suspended halfway to my lips. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. My husband? Richard had been dead for 2 years. Was this girl so ignorant she didn't even know I was a widow? Then it hit me. She wasn't confused. She was talking about some imaginary future where her family had somehow acquired control of my late husband's corporation. The company Richard had built from absolutely nothing over 40 years of 18-hour days and missed family dinners. The company I'd been running as CEO since his death, growing profits by 18%, while everyone whispered I was just keeping the seat warm for Brandon. I set down my wine glass very carefully, forcing my hands not to shake. "Interesting offer," I said, keeping my voice steady and cold. "But he actually owns the corporation that employs your father." I'd learned that little detail from Patricia, my executive assistant. Marcus Brennan worked in lower management at one of our subsidiaries, a fact my son had conveniently never mentioned during 6 months of Sunday dinners and company events. Tori's smile faltered for just a heartbeat. But before she could recover, Brandon, my son, my only child, the baby I'd held in my arms 35 years ago, interrupted me with a tone I'd never heard him use before. "Mom," he said, and his eyes were so cold they could have frozen water. "I deliberately kept this from you, but Tori's brothers and uncles are replacing Dad's entire board of directors. The vote is scheduled for January 3rd. My heart stopped. The board? Richard's carefully assembled 14-member board? The one that required a 2/3 majority for any major decisions? The one filled with people who'd known Richard for decades? I looked around the dining room with sudden clarity, my business instincts screaming. "Brandon, darling, I thought Tori's family was joining us for Christmas dinner. Where are they?" "They couldn't make it," Tori said too quickly. "All 6 of them?" I pressed, feeling something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. "Your father, Marcus, your brothers Ryan and Jason, your uncles Kevin and Donald, and wasn't your cousin Thomas coming too?" "They had other commitments," Brandon muttered, unable to meet my eyes. I stood up slowly, surveying the empty chairs, the untouched place settings, the suspiciously absent Brennan family who were supposedly about to stage a corporate coup in less than 2 weeks. Everything clicked into place with terrible clarity. "Then I suggest," I said very firmly, my voice carrying through the entire first floor, "we pause this lovely dinner while someone explains to me how 6 men who don't own a single share of Hartwell Industries plan to replace a board that my late husband spent 4 decades building." The look on Brandon's face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just some gold digger marrying my son for money. This was organized, calculated, a conspiracy, and my own child was part of it. But here's what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known. I hadn't survived 2 years as CEO of a multi-million-dollar manufacturing empire by being naive, and I certainly hadn't gotten there by letting people underestimate me just because I was a 68-year-old widow. They wanted to play games with my husband's legacy? Fine. But they just made the mistake of challenging the wrong woman. Let me back up and tell you exactly how this nightmare started. My name is Eleanor Victoria Hartwell. I'm 68 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've lived in this sprawling Connecticut estate with manicured lawns and a circular driveway that looks like something out of a magazine. But I wasn't born into this world. I grew up in a modest two-bedroom house in Newark, the daughter of a postal worker and a seamstress. I met Richard Hartwell when I was 23, working as a secretary at a small accounting firm. He was 28, just starting his manufacturing business out of a rented warehouse. We fell in love over lukewarm coffee and dreams that seemed impossible. We built Hartwell Industries together. People always gave Richard all the credit, and he deserved most of it. But I was there for every decision, every risk, every sleepless night when we didn't know if we'd make payroll. I managed the books, negotiated with suppliers, handled HR before we could afford to hire anyone for it. When Brandon was born, I worked from home, typing invoices with a baby on my lap. Richard was the brilliant engineer, the visionary. I was the backbone that kept everything standing. 42 years of marriage, 40 years of building something that mattered. And then, 2 years ago, Richard had a massive heart attack at his desk while reviewing quarterly reports. He was 70 years old. The doctors said he never felt any pain, that he was gone before he hit the floor. I've told myself that 1,000 times, trying to find comfort in it. It never works. The board voted unanimously to make me acting CEO until Brandon was ready. Brandon was 35 then, working as VP of operations. And honestly, he wasn't ready. He had Richard's intelligence, but none of his discipline. There was always this tension between them. Richard's expectations were sky high, and Brandon could never quite reach them. I thought maybe with his father gone, Brandon would finally step into his own. I thought grief might bring us closer. I was wrong about so many things. 6 months ago, on a sunny Sunday in June, Brandon showed up at the mansion with a woman I'd never met. I was in the garden, deadheading roses, when I heard his car on the gravel driveway. "Mom!" he called out, and there was something different in his voice. Excited, almost manic. "I want you to meet someone special." She stepped out of his Mercedes like she was walking onto a red carpet. Victoria Brennan, 28 years old, with honey blonde hair styled in perfect waves and a sundress that showed off a figure that probably required a personal trainer. Her smile was too bright, her handshake too firm, her eye contact too intense. "Mrs. Hartwell," she gushed, "I've heard so much about you. Brandon says you're the real brains behind Hartwell Industries. I'm absolutely dying to hear all about it." The first red flag should have been obvious. Brandon had been secretly dating her for 3 months without mentioning her once. 3 months. My son, who used to tell me everything, who called every Sunday without fail, had kept this woman completely hidden from me. But I pushed down my hurt feelings and welcomed her with open arms. What else was a mother supposed to do? "Please call me Eleanor," I said, though she never did. "Tell me about yourself, Victoria." "Oh, there's not much to tell about boring old me," she said with a practiced laugh. "But I want to hear everything about Hartwell Industries. Brandon's been so secretive about the family business. How many employees do you have? What's the annual revenue? Is it true you manufacture parts for 3 of the major automotive companies?" At the time, I thought she was just trying to show interest in our family. Now I know she was conducting reconnaissance. Over the next few weeks, Brandon brought Tori everywhere. Company picnics, charity galas, board dinners. She was always asking questions, always digging for details. How long had Richard owned the company? Were there other shareholders? What were the rules for board elections? What would happen to the company if something happened to me? "Tori's just curious," Brandon would say whenever I gently tried to redirect the conversation. "She wants to understand my world." Then in August, they got engaged. Brandon didn't ask my opinion or even tell me he was planning to propose. I found out when they showed up at Sunday brunch with a ring on her finger, a massive diamond that must have cost a fortune. "We're getting married in March," Brandon announced, not asked. "And Mom, we need to talk about my role at the company. I'm ready to take over as CEO. You've done an amazing job holding things together after Dad died, but you're 68 years old. Don't you want to retire, travel, enjoy your life?" The way he said it made it sound like I was some doddering old woman who needed to be put out to pasture, not the person who'd increased company profits by 18% in 2 years. "Brandon, we discussed this," I said carefully, very aware that Tori was watching us like a hawk. "The board and I agreed on a 3-year transition plan. You'll take over as CEO when you turn 37. That's only 2 more years." His face darkened. 2 more years of everyone seeing me as Richard Hartwell's son instead of my own man. Tori put her hand on his arm, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Calculation. "Mrs. Hartwell, Brandon just wants what's rightfully his. The company was always meant to be his inheritance. I'm sure you understand." Inheritance. The word made my skin crawl. As if Richard had died instead of building something meant to last for generations. That's when the strange incident started. In early September, Patricia came to my office looking worried. Patricia Chen had been my executive assistant for 15 years. I trusted her completely. "Mrs. Hartwell, I think you should know something," she said, closing the door behind her. "Brandon was in Mr. Hartwell's private office yesterday. After hours, the office we sealed after his death." My stomach dropped. "What was he doing?" "He said he was looking for old family photos. But Mrs. Hartwell, he was in the file cabinet marked Board Documents, Confidential. I saw him photographing papers with his phone. I didn't confront Brandon immediately. Richard had taught me better than that. Instead, I watched. I listened. I paid attention." In October, Patricia mentioned that 4 men had applied for various positions at Hartwell Industries, all with the last name Brennan. "They're not particularly qualified," she said, handing me their applications. "One has a bankruptcy on his record. Another was fired from his last 3 jobs, but they're all asking specifically about board positions or senior management." "Tori's family?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Patricia nodded. Her father, 2 brothers, and an uncle. HR was going to reject them, but Brandon personally overrode the decision and scheduled interviews. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just a coincidence. Then in early November, Gerald Montgomery called. Gerald had been Richard's closest friend for 40 years and our corporate attorney for just as long. If Gerald was worried, I needed to pay attention. "Eleanor, something strange is happening," he said without preamble. "I've been contacted by a law firm I've never heard of, requesting copies of all board meeting minutes for the past 5 years. They claim they're representing a shareholder, but they won't say which one." "What else did they ask for?" "That's what concerns me. They're specifically asking about the rules for emergency board elections and procedures for replacing board members." He paused. "Eleanor, I think someone's planning a takeover attempt." "Someone? Or my son?" The silence on the other end told me everything. The final breaking point came 3 weeks before Christmas. I was working late at the mansion when I heard voices coming from Richard's study. The room I'd kept exactly as he'd left it, too heartbroken to change a single thing. I walked quietly down the hallway in my house slippers, barely breathing. Brandon's voice. "Sure the timing will work? You said January 3rd. Then Tori's voice, and the sweetness was completely gone, replaced by something sharp and businesslike. My father confirmed it. "Once we have the proxy votes and the new board members in place, she can't stop us. The bylaws say a 2/3 majority can remove any officer, including the CEO." I pressed myself against the wall, my hand over my mouth. "And your family can handle running a company this size?" Brandon asked. Tori laughed, actually laughed. "My dad ran a business for 15 years before that unfortunate bankruptcy. He knows exactly what he's doing, and with your name and your father's reputation, Investors won't suspect anything until it's too late. By the time your mother realizes what's happening, we'll control everything." I felt like I couldn't breathe. My own son, my baby. "What about my mother's shares?" Brandon asked. "That's the beautiful part. She only owns 35%. Your father put the rest in a trust for you, remember? The trust that transfers to your full control when you marry." Her voice was smug, satisfied. "Once we're married in March, we'll have 40% combined. Add the proxy votes we're collecting from the smaller shareholders, and we'll have our 2/3 majority." My son laughed. My son actually laughed. "She has no idea what's coming." "Of course not," Tori said, and I could hear the contempt in her voice. "She still thinks I'm just some girl who fell in love with her precious son. She's so desperate for you to be happy that she'd never suspect we're planning this. Honestly, Eleanor, it's kind of pathetic how trusting she is." I backed away from the door silently, my whole body shaking. I made it to my bedroom and sat in the darkness for hours, unable to move, unable to think clearly. My son, the baby I'd rocked through colic, the toddler I'd taught to read, the teenager I'd defended when Richard was too harsh, the young man I'd believed in even when he struggled, was conspiring to steal his father's company. Not just from me, but from everything Richard had sacrificed to build. And he was doing it with a woman who saw him as nothing more than a tool, a means to an end. Have you ever had your heart broken by someone you'd die for? Have you ever realized that the person you love most in the world sees you as an obstacle to eliminate? That night changed me. I sat in that dark bedroom until the sun came up, and when morning light finally crept through the curtains, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. I wouldn't tip my hand and give them a chance to cover their tracks or change their plans. Instead, I would do what Richard had taught me in 40 years of business. I would investigate. I would gather evidence. I would build an airtight case. And then, when they least expected it, I would destroy them. Because Richard might be gone, but I was still here. And I hadn't kept his company thriving for 2 years by being a naive old woman who could be pushed aside and manipulated. They wanted to play games with my husband's legacy. They'd just made the fatal mistake of underestimating a widow with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The morning after I overheard that conversation in Richard's study, I did something I'd never imagined in my wildest nightmares. I hired a private investigator to spy on my own son. His name was David Reeves, a retired FBI agent with 20 years of experience in corporate fraud. Gerald Montgomery recommended him when I called at 7 a.m., my voice barely steady enough to explain, in the vaguest possible terms, that I suspected serious financial impropriety within Hartwell Industries. We met that afternoon at a nondescript coffee shop 40 minutes from the mansion, the kind of place where nobody knew who I was. David was in his late 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He sat across from me with a notebook and a tablet, sipping black coffee while I pushed my untouched latte around. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, after I finished laying out the overheard conversation. Tori's endless questions, the suspicious job applications, and Brandon's sudden attitude change. "What you're describing sounds like a textbook corporate Cinderella scheme. It's sophisticated, but it has a very specific pattern." "Tell me," I said, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking. He leaned forward. "An attractive young woman from a financially struggling family targets the heir to a substantial business, preferably someone with unresolved daddy issues or feelings of inadequacy. She seduces him, validates him, makes him feel like the king of the world. Meanwhile, her family, usually led by a disgraced businessman father, researches the target company exhaustively. They identify weaknesses in corporate governance, gather intelligence on shareholders, and execute a takeover that appears completely legal on paper." My throat tightened. "How common is this?" "More than you'd think, especially with family-owned manufacturing firms like yours. The Brennans sound familiar?" He pulled up his tablet and tapped a few times. "Marcus Brennan. Bankruptcies in 2016, 2012, and 2008. 3 different states, 3 different family manufacturing businesses. Each time, a daughter married into the target family 6 to 9 months before the collapse. I felt the room tilt. They've done this before? David turned the tablet toward me. A grainy newspaper photo showed a younger Marcus Brennan being led out of a courthouse by his arm. The headline read, "Family Business, Bankruptcy, Linked to Suspicious Board Takeover. Donovan Manufacturing Files Fraud Complaint." Exactly like your situation, David said. Daughter infiltrates via marriage to owner's son. Family members get hired into key positions. Proxy votes collected through deception or forgery. New board installed via emergency vote. Company assets stripped and sold. Bankruptcy declared. Brennans walk away with millions while the real owners are left with nothing. I stared at the photo, bile rising in my throat. This man, this smiling, confident con artist, was planning to do the same to Richard's legacy. To the company that employed 1,200 people. To the pension fund that supported 300 retirees. "And the daughters?" I whispered. David's expression darkened. Divorced immediately after the collapse, each one remarries within a year. Different state, different target. Tori Brennan is number 4. 4 families destroyed, 4 legacies stolen, and now mine. "How do they avoid prison?" I asked. "They're careful. The proxy votes look legitimate. The board appointments follow bylaws to the letter. By the time anyone proves fraud, the statute of limitations has passed or the victims can't afford prolonged litigation." He paused. "But Mrs. Hartwell, if we can prove forgery or coercion in obtaining those proxies, we have them." "Do it," I said, my voice suddenly steady. "Find everything, every victim, every scam, every shred of evidence, and find out exactly what they're planning for January 3rd. David nodded. "It'll cost $20,000 up front, and I need full access to your corporate records. Send me the contract. Gerald will handle payment." As I drove home through the gathering dusk, my mind raced. Brandon wasn't evil. He was weak, entitled, resentful of Richard's shadow, desperate to prove himself. And Tori had exploited every single one of those vulnerabilities. But knowledge is power. And for the first time since overhearing that conversation, I felt something besides heartbreak. I felt control. Over the next 10 days, David delivered results faster than I expected. First came the Brennan family dossier, criminal records, financials, even high school yearbooks showing Marcus's pattern of targeting promising young businessmen since the 1980s, then the previous victims. I spoke with Margaret Donovan on the phone while sitting in Richard's study, her voice still bitter 8 years later. "He seemed like such a nice man," Margaret told me, her voice cracking. "Stable, experienced. My son Tommy was so excited to have a father-in-law in business. 6 months later, they owned our company. 9 months after that, bankruptcy. Tommy attempted suicide. My husband had a stroke. We lost everything." "Did you prosecute?" "We tried, but our lawyers said proving the proxy fraud would take years and cost more than the company was worth. The Brennans had already moved to Pennsylvania, where Tori's sister Lisa had married into the Henderson fortune. Same pattern, same timeline. David's next report made my blood run cold. Surveillance photos of Tori meeting a man who wasn't Brandon. Grainy images from a restaurant parking lot, her arms around his neck, laughing in a way I'd never seen her laugh with my son. "That's Derek Castellano," David explained when we met again. "Relationship coach, trains the Brennan daughters on seduction techniques, psychological manipulation, even specific sexual strategies to create dependency. Tori's been meeting him weekly since August. Phone records show 300 texts, most late at night." I stared at the photos until they burned into my retinas. "She doesn't love him. No, ma'am, this is her profession." My chest ached, not just for Brandon, but for the boy he'd been. The child I'd protected from Richard's disappointment. The young man I'd defended when he made mistakes. I'd made him vulnerable. I'd taught him to need validation so desperately that a professional con artist could weaponize it. "There's more," David said grimly. He slid a folder across the table. Proxy voting agreements, 6 of them from minor shareholders. Brandon obtained all of them personally. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The signatures looked familiar. Howard Mitchell, Evelyn Carter, Robert Langley. People who'd known Richard for decades. People who'd attended Brandon's baptism. "These are legitimate?" I asked. David shook his head. 3 are forgeries. Howard Mitchell's especially. Too smooth for an 83-year-old with arthritis. I spoke with him yesterday. He remembers Brandon visiting in November, asking him to sign a routine corporate update form. Howard thought it was just acknowledging the quarterly report. Brandon lied to him. My voice broke. Howard had been like a grandfather to Brandon. Yes, and the other 3 shareholders confirm the same story. Deception, not outright fraud. But when combined with the forgeries, David tapped the folder. "This is prosecutable. Prosecutable. My son could go to prison, my only child, the baby I'd carried through 3 miscarriages before he finally arrived healthy." I closed the folder. "Keep digging. I need everything before January 3rd. David hesitated. "Mrs. Hartwell, you should prepare yourself. Brandon's signature appears as VP of Operations on every document. He can't claim ignorance." "Not successfully." "I know," I whispered. That night, I barely slept. I wandered the mansion like a ghost, touching Richard's things, his fountain pen on the desk, his monogrammed slippers by the fireplace, the photo of us on our wedding day where we both looked so impossibly young. How had we created a son capable of this? The next morning brought the first concrete evidence that made everything real. Patricia called me at the office, her voice tight with worry. "Mrs. Hartwell, you need to see this. Brandon scheduled a board meeting for December 28th. Emergency session. Agenda item 1. Election of new board members." My heart stopped. December 28th? That's 5 days before their planned January 3rd vote. Exactly, and look who he invited as special consultants. She emailed me the list. Marcus Brennan, Ryan Brennan, Jason Brennan, Kevin Brennan, Marcus's brother, Thomas Brennan, Tori's cousin. 5 Brennan men, plus Brandon's proxy votes, targeting a board that trusted him implicitly. I forwarded the agenda to David immediately. Within hours, he confirmed what I feared. The December 28th meeting was a Trojan horse. Legally, the board could only replace 2 members per year. But if they voted to expand the board from 14 to 20 members, an action requiring only a simple majority, then packed it with Brennan allies. It was brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. By January 3rd, they'd control everything. I needed allies, real ones. I called Gerald Montgomery. "I need Richard's private files, everything about shareholder agreements, board bylaws, the trust conditions on Brandon's inheritance." "Already pulling them," Gerald said. "Eleanor, there's something you should know. Richard added specific protections 5 years ago. He suspected Brandon might act impulsively." "What kind of protections?" "The trust transfers full control only if Brandon marries someone who passes a third-party background check and whom he's known for 2 years minimum. Wedding date doesn't matter." Hope flickered. Tori fails both. Catastrophically. And there's more. Richard gave you veto power over any board expansion larger than 20%. You can block their December 28th power grab single-handedly. Richard, even dead, he was protecting us. But the antagonists were getting bolder. That same week, Tori called me, just to chat. "Mrs. Hartwell, Brandon's been so stressed lately," she said, her voice dripping syrup. "All this company pressure, I worry about him. Maybe he should take some time off. Let others handle things?" "Like who?" I asked mildly. "Oh, you know, experienced people. My father has so many great ideas for modernizing operations." I gripped the phone until my knuckles whitened. "That's thoughtful of you, Victoria. But Hartwell Industries has been quite successful under current management. She laughed lightly. Of course, you're doing fine for your age, but change is good, right? The condescension burned, but I kept my voice sweet. Absolutely. Speaking of change, I haven't met your family yet. When are they coming for Christmas? A slight pause. Oh, they're very busy. Dad has meetings, my brothers have work. All 6 of them? On Christmas Eve? Another pause. Longer this time. Family tradition, she finally said, but Brandon and I will be there. I hung up knowing exactly why her family wouldn't show. They weren't ready. The December 28th meeting was their first strike. Christmas was too early to reveal their hand. My internal conflict raged constantly. Part of me wanted to confront Brandon immediately, shake him until he woke up. But Richard's voice echoed in my memory. Never show your cards until you're certain of victory. So I dug deeper instead of exploding. David's next bombshell came Friday morning. He'd hacked, legally, through a contact, the Brennan family email server. What he found made me physically ill. Emails from Marcus to his sons. Hartwell Industries valuation, $187 million. Primary assets, 3 factories, corporate campus, $42 million pension fund. Phase 1 complete, Proxy acquisition. Phase 2, December 28th, board expansion. Phase 3, January 3, CEO removal. Projected extraction, $65 million before bankruptcy filing. Extraction. Not management. Extraction. And an email from Tori to Derek Castellano. Target fully dependent. Resents mother, craves validation. Wedding set. March 15th, trust activation. Continue twice weekly sessions. He's putty. I sat at my desk for an hour afterward, staring at nothing. My son was putty. My company was a carcass to be stripped. Richard's life's work was extraction target, $65 million. That weekend, the antagonists escalated. Brandon called a family meeting at the mansion, him, Tori, and me. He arrived with a folder of concerns about company performance. Mom, profits are flatlining, he said, spreading charts across the dining table. Every single one cherry-picked or manipulated. We need fresh leadership. Dad's old methods aren't working anymore. Tori nodded sympathetically. Mrs. Hartwell, no offense, but maybe it's time to step back. Let younger blood take the reins. I sipped my tea, letting them talk for 20 minutes. Their confidence grew with every unchallenged lie. Finally, I set down my cup. Brandon, these charts are fabricated. Third quarter profits were up 12%. And Victoria, if you'd like to discuss leadership qualifications, perhaps start with your father's bankruptcy record. Tori's smile froze. Brandon flushed red. Mom, that's not relevant? I finished. Actually, it is. I've been reviewing personnel files. Marcus Brennan's employment at our subsidiary ends Monday. You can't do that, Tori snapped, her mask slipping completely. I can. I am CEO. I stood up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. They left fuming, but I saw the crack. They'd expected compliance, not resistance. They thought I was the naive widow they'd mocked. Sunday night, alone in the mansion, I sat with David's latest report. He'd traced money trails, shell companies funneling Brennan profits offshore, victim statements from 3 families, forged proxy analyses, a timeline that proved 6 months of premeditation. My decision crystallized. No more doubt, no more hoping Brandon would snap out of it. The scope was bigger than I'd imagined, not just greed, but organized crime. Professional con artists targeting family businesses, and my son was their Trojan horse. I called David. I need everything ready by Christmas Eve. Full dossier, witness statements, forensic accounting. We're ending this. Understood. Mrs. Hartwell, are you sure? Your son? My son made choices, I said, my voice steel. Now he'll live with the consequences. I hung up and looked at Richard's photo on the desk. I wish you were here, I whispered. but I'll protect what we built, even if it destroys me. What I discovered next would break my heart into 1,000 pieces. But it would also give me the final weapon I needed to bring them all down. David's investigation accelerated into overdrive after the December 28th board meeting agenda surfaced. By Monday morning, he arrived at my office unannounced, carrying 2 briefcases and a grim expression that told me this was big. Patricia showed him straight in, then closed the door behind her with a worried glance. "Mrs. Hartwell," David said, setting the cases on my desk. "We just cracked their communication backbone. Marcus Brennan's been using an encrypted app called Signal for the Inner Circle Communications. We got a warrant based on the Proxy forgeries. What we found changes everything." He opened the first case and powered up a tablet. The screen filled with message threads. Marcus to Tori, Marcus to his sons, group chats time-stamped back to May. "May 14th, David said, scrolling. "First contact. Promising target identified. Hartwell Industries. Son age 35, VP Operations. Mother CEO, widow 2 years. Inheritance trust suspected. Initiate phase 1. That's the day Tori met Brandon at that charity auction." I felt nauseous. 6 months. Not a whirlwind romance. A calculated infiltration from day 1. "Keep going," I whispered. He scrolled forward. June 22nd. Tori to Marcus. Target acquired. Heavy resentment toward father. Mother overprotective, vulnerable to flattery. Wedding timeline accelerated. Attached photo. Brandon smiling at her across a restaurant table. July 10th. Marcus to sons. Mother accessing private files. Increase pressure on son. Pushboard expansion narrative. Ryan replied. Interviews scheduled. Dad's bankruptcy scrubbed from resume. My hands clenched into fists. They'd planned every move, every spontaneous dinner invitation, every seemingly innocent question about company structure. It was all choreographed. But the real gut punch came in the October threads. Marcus. Proxy phase critical. Son unreliable on forgeries. Use clean signatures where possible. Fabricate Mitchell, Carter, Langley. Attached. Scans of Howard Mitchell's shaky signature from a 2019 Christmas card, digitally smoothed into perfection. "These aren't just forgeries," David said quietly. "They're identity theft, using personal documents to create fraudulent corporate votes, federal crime." I stared at Howard's altered signature. The man who'd bounced Brandon on his knee at family picnics. How many proxies total? 11. 6 obtained through deception, 3 forged, 2 coerced. Combined with Brandon's trust shares, that's 47% voting control. The full extent hit me like a freight train. Not just greed, not just family betrayal. Organized, premeditated corporate raiding. Professional criminals targeting vulnerable family businesses, with my son as their inside man. David opened the second case, financial records. Here's their exit strategy. 3 shell companies already incorporated in Delaware. Hartwell Industries assets tagged for transfer. Main factory to Brennan Holdings. Pension fund to Industrial Trust Partners. Corporate campus to New England Properties. All traced back to Marcus Brennan through layered nominees. Extraction plan, I said bitterly, remembering their email. Exactly. They bankrupt the operating company while stripping real assets. Previous victims lost 80–90% of value. Your 1,200 employees? Gone. Pensioners? Wiped out. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the factory sprawling across 20 acres. Men and women I'd known for decades, working shifts, raising families on Hartwell paychecks. Richard had built this as a legacy for them, not carrion for vultures. "What's our timeline?" I asked, turning back. December 28th. Board expansion is strike 1. If it passes, they install 5 Brennan board members. January 3rd, they vote you out as CEO, Brandon in. January 15th, wedding triggers trust transfer, or so they think. March, full asset stripping begins. I nodded. We stopped them at December 28th. David hesitated. "Mrs. Hartwell, there's one more thing. Tori's insurance policy on Brandon. He pulled up a photo, Brandon signing documents at a kitchen table, Tori smiling sweetly beside him. Background: a life insurance policy for $5 million, beneficiary Victoria Brennan. Standard con technique, David explained. If Brandon gets cold feet or becomes a problem post-takeover, they have motive and means. Not saying they'd do it, but the room spun. My son wasn't just a mark. He was disposable. Get me everything, every email, every shell company filing, every forged signature analysis. And contact those previous victims. I want affidavits. Already working on it. But you need to prepare for the emotional cost. Brandon's facing 15 years minimum if prosecutors pursue the forgeries aggressively. 15 years. My only child in federal prison. The thought made my chest ache, but I pushed it down. He chose this. Now we expose it. Gathering irrefutable evidence became my life's work over the next week. David worked around the clock. I barely slept. Patricia became my gatekeeper, screening all Brandon's requests to see me. First came the recordings. David had planted legal surveillance, public spaces, company property, a coffee shop meetup between Tori and Derek Castellano, captured clean. "You're losing him," Derek said, audible frustration. "Too much mother pressure. Dial back the wedding talk. Ramp up the 'you're better than your dad' narrative." Tori sighed. Mother's suspicious, asking about family Christmas. I deflected, but "stick to script," Derek snapped. "Seduce, isolate, extract. You've done this 3 times. 3 times. Her sisters, her training wheels. Next, shareholder affidavits. I personally visited Howard Mitchell at his assisted living apartment. The man who taught Brandon to fish looked frail but furious. "Eleanor, that boy lied to my face," Howard said, his arthritic hands trembling on his walker. "Said it was just paperwork, if I'd known." He trailed off, eyes wet. Richard would roll in his grave. "I know," I said softly. "Will you testify?" "Damn right I will. Those crooks won't touch another family." Evelyn Carter, Robert Langley, same story. Deceived by a boy they'd watched grow up. By Wednesday, we had 6 sworn statements. Then Gerald delivered the legal analysis. He came to the mansion Thursday night, papers stacked 2 feet high. "Eleanor, this is airtight," he said, spreading documents across Richard's desk. "The proxy forgeries alone trigger SEC violations, RICO statutes, elder fraud. Add the shell companies, and it's a grand slam." "What's our play?" "Immediate injunction blocking December 28th meeting. Criminal referrals to FBI, SEC, Connecticut AG. Civil suits against Brennans for fraud, conspiracy, and—" He hesitated. "Brandon faces charges unless he flips." Flips. Testifies against Tori and Marcus. Would prosecutors cut a deal? If he delivers the inner circle, probation, maybe community service, but he'd have to give evidence against everyone, including himself. I closed my eyes. Brandon in witness protection. Our family name dragged through tabloids. But the alternative, prison stripes for 15 years, might be worse. The antagonists escalated their tactics as they sensed resistance. Friday morning, Tori showed up at my office unannounced, all wide eyes and trembling lip. "Mrs. Hartwell, can we talk? Brandon's devastated. You fired his future father-in-law and now he's questioning everything." I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Let her think she had the upper hand. "Victoria, Marcus Brennan's employment was terminated for cause, performance issues." Her eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake. Brandon needs family support now, not corporate politics." "Family support," I repeated mildly. "Like the 6 relatives planning to join our board?" She froze just for a heartbeat. Then the mask snapped back. "I don't know what you've heard, but—" "I've heard plenty." I leaned forward. "I've seen the signal chats, the shell companies. The life insurance policy listing you as beneficiary on my son. Her face went white. You can't prove... I have Howard Mitchell's affidavit, Evelyn Carter's handwriting analysis, FBI warrants on your father's servers. I stood up. Tell Marcus the game's over. Leave Connecticut by Sunday or Monday morning. Brandon walks into the U.S. Attorney's office with full immunity and a complete confession. You'd destroy your own son? She hissed. I'd save him, which is more than you're planning. I pressed the intercom. Patricia, please escort Ms. Brennan out. She stormed past Patricia, but I saw the panic. Their timeline was collapsing. That night marked my emotional breaking point. I sat in Richard's study until 2 a.m., surrounded by evidence files, playing Tori's conversation with Derek on loop. Each repetition carved deeper into my heart. My baby, my brilliant, troubled boy, seduced, manipulated, weaponized against his own blood. Every "I love you, Mom" from the past 6 months, a lie. Every hug, a performance. Tears came then, hot and silent, for the son I'd lost, for the family we'd never be again, for Richard, who'd seen this vulnerability and tried to protect him with trusts and bylaws. But grief hardened into resolve. I couldn't save the boy Brandon had been, but maybe I could save the man he might become. Saturday morning, I made the decision to seek professional help. First, Gerald's partner, a white-collar specialist named Laura Kensington. She came to the mansion with a team of 6. Eleanor, Laura said after 3 hours of briefing, this is bigger than Connecticut. RICO, mail fraud, securities violations. The U.S. attorney will salivate over this. Brennan's could face 25-30 years. And Brandon? Cooperating witness? He walks with time served, maybe probation. She paused. But he'll have to record everything, wear a wire. I nodded. Set it up. Next, the FBI. Special Agent Maria Vasquez met me at a federal office building, crisp suit and no-nonsense stare. Mrs. Hartwell, your evidence package triggered 3 separate task forces. Brennan's match 6 open cases. We move Monday unless you say otherwise. Do it, I said. Finally, I called David. One more thing, Tori's apartment, full sweep. Already done. Hidden camera in bedroom, burner phones, $240,000 cash in floor safe. And Mrs. Hartwell, divorce papers pre-drafted. Dated January 15th. The wedding day. She'd planned to bankrupt us, divorce Brandon, and vanish with her cut. My counterplan crystallized that afternoon. No more defense, full offense. Emergency board meeting. Monday, me presiding. Revoke all proxies pending investigation. File injunction blocking December 28th agenda. Brandon wears wire to final Brennan meetup. Full confession on tape. Christmas Eve dinner. The trap. Confront them with everything while FBI listens remotely. I felt strangely calm as pieces locked into place. Heartbroken, yes. Terrified for Brandon, absolutely. But powerful. They'd underestimated me from day one. The trusting widow, the naive mother, the obstacle to remove. Sunday night, Tori tried one last manipulation tactic. She called Brandon's phone. I answered. Eleanor, let's be reasonable, she cooed. Marcus offers $10 million to drop everything. Clean break. I laughed, actually laughed. Tell Marcus to enjoy his last Christmas free. Monday, 24 federal agents execute simultaneous warrants. Your father's going away for decades. Silence. Then a hiss. You heartless bitch. Good night, Victoria. I hung up, poured myself a scotch, Richard's favorite, and toasted the empty study. To endings, I said softly, and new beginnings. The pieces were in place, evidence irrefutable, allies mobilized, confrontation imminent. They thought they were hunters. They had no idea they'd become the prey. Monday morning, I executed the first phase of my counterplan with surgical precision. I called an emergency board meeting for 10 a.m., me presiding. No prior notice to Brandon or his allies. Gerald Montgomery sat to my right, laptop open with the injunction papers ready to file. Patricia had the conference room secured, phones jammed on conference mode that secretly routed everything to David's monitoring station. The 14 board members filed in, loyal Richard veterans, all of them. Faces I'd known for decades. Howard Mitchell arrived last, leaning on his cane but with fire in his eyes. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," I began, standing at the head of the table. "Hartwell Industries faces an existential threat: corporate espionage, proxy fraud, forgery. Our VP of operations has been compromised." Murmurs rippled through the room. I nodded to Gerald, who distributed the proxy analysis, side-by-side originals versus forgeries. Howard Mitchell's shaky Christmas card signature next to the impossibly smooth corporate version. "My God," whispered Evelyn Carter, her hand over her mouth. "Brandon did this?" "Not alone," I said calmly. "A criminal enterprise led by Marcus Brennan, using his daughter Victoria to manipulate Brandon. They've targeted 3 other family firms. Here are the FBI case files." Gerald projected the signal chat logs. Gasps filled the room as Marcus's extraction plan filled the screen. Factory transfers, pension fund raids, $65 million projected theft. Robert Langley slammed his fist on the table. "That boy! Richard gave him everything!" I raised my hand. "Richard anticipated this. I've invoked my veto authority under Article 7, Section 4. No board expansion before June 30th. All proxies are revoked pending federal investigation." "Seconded," Howard growled. "Unanimous." Motion carried 14-0. Brandon's December 28th power grab was dead. By noon, Gerald filed the injunction in Connecticut Superior Court. By 1 p.m., the SEC had our complaint. By 2 p.m., FBI agent Vasquez confirmed warrants were printing. Brandon called at 2:17 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. His message shook me despite everything. "Mom, what the hell? The board meeting? You revoked my proxies? This is insane. Tori says you're having some kind of breakdown. Call me back." I forwarded it to David. Brandon was panicking. Perfect. Phase 2, the wire. David met Brandon that evening at a park bench near the mansion. Neutral ground, full audio-video surveillance. I watched the feed from my home office, heart pounding. "Brandon," David began, straight to business. "Your mother has everything. Signal chats, shell companies, forged proxies, FBI warrants execute tomorrow." Brandon's face went ashen. "This is crazy. Mom's lost it. Tori said..." "Tori's a professional con artist. Here's her with her coach." David showed the restaurant kiss photo. Brandon recoiled like he'd been slapped. "No, no way." But doubt crept into his voice. David pressed play on the Derek recording. Tori's voice filled the air. "Mother's suspicious. Seduce, isolate, extract. You've done this 3 times. Brandon buried his face in his hands. Oh God, what did I do?" "You participated in proxy fraud, signatures on every document, 15 years federal time minimum." Brandon looked up, tears streaming. "I didn't forge anything. Marcus said the lawyers approved it. I wanted to prove myself. Dad always saw me as a failure." David slid a recorder across the bench. "Your mother wants to help you. But you need to deliver Marcus and Tori. Full confession on tape. Names, dates, money trails." Brandon stared at the device like it was radioactive. "She'd do that? After everything?" "She already hired my firm. Cost her $20,000. She's protecting the company. 1,200 jobs, your father's legacy. You can still salvage something." Long silence. Then Brandon picked up the recorder. "What do I need to say?" By 9 p.m., we had 47 minutes of Brandon's confession. Every meeting, every document, every lie Marcus fed him. Tori's manipulation techniques, the $5 million life insurance policy. Divorce papers predated for January 15th. I listened to the tape alone in Richard's study, tears blurring the screen. My son's voice, broken but honest. I hated living in Dad's shadow. Tori made me feel special, capable, but she never loved me. Mom was right all along. He'd almost thrown his life away for validation from a sociopath. But he was cooperating. There might be a path back. Phase 3 nearly went wrong. Tuesday morning, Marcus Brennan showed up at the mansion gate with 2 lawyers and Tori. Security called me. "Let them in," I said. Time to rattle them. They stormed into the living room like they owned it. Marcus, silver hair slicked back, $1,000 suit straining at the belly. Tori, fury behind designer sunglasses, 2 attorneys clutching briefcases. "Eleanor," Marcus boomed, "this hysteria ends now. We'll settle for $15 million. NDA, you keep your widow's tears and memories." I sat calmly on the sofa, Gerald beside me. "Mr. Brennan, your warrants arrive in 90 minutes. Simultaneous service, your home, office, Tori's apartment. RICO, securities fraud, identity theft." Tori laughed bitterly. "Bluff." I pressed play on a remote. Brandon's voice filled the room. Marcus told me the forgeries were technicalities, said Mom was blocking my destiny. Marcus's face drained of color. Tori ripped off her sunglasses. "You put a wire on your own son?" "I gave him a choice," I said evenly. "Cooperate or federal prison." He chose wisely. The lead attorney cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hartwell, perhaps we should discuss terms?" I stood. "FBI has your signal servers, shell company filings, victim affidavits. Your Ohio case just reopened, statute told by federal conspiracy." Marcus leaned forward, voice low and venomous. "You think you can destroy me? I've buried richer widows than you." Gerald slid a folder across the coffee table. Marcus Brennan's 2008 plea deal. Money laundering. 15 months served. "Try me," Gerald said. "RICO multipliers mean 25-40 years. Your son's too." Tori grabbed Marcus's arm. "Dad, we need to go." Marcus stood slowly, eyes locked on mine. "This isn't over." "Yes," I said softly, "it is." Security escorted them out. 2 minutes later, Agent Vasquez called. "All clear. Brennan residence, $240,000 cash in floor safe. Tori's apartment, burner phones, divorce papers, Marcus's office, server farm mirroring your signal chats." I exhaled for the first time in hours. The trap was sprung. Brennans realized something was catastrophically wrong, but they weren't done. Desperation bred boldness. That night, Brandon called in hysterics. "Mom, Tori's father threatened me, said if I testify, accidents happen." And Tori, she left a voicemail. "You were an easy mark. Enjoy prison with Mommy." "Stay at the safe house," I told him. "FBI detail outside. You're doing the right thing." Wednesday brought the ironic reversals. Marcus's experienced hires, Ryan and Jason Brennan, tried calling board members directly, offering bribes for proxy votes. All recorded, all forwarded to FBI. Tori attempted a smear campaign, emailing industry contacts claiming I had early dementia, and Brandon was rescuing the family firm. Patricia traced the IP, Tori's apartment, post-warrant. Even better, their own actions trapped them. Marcus's hasty shell company transfers triggered FinCEN alerts. Tori's cash withdrawal from the safe, bank camera footage handed to FBI gift-wrapped. By Thursday, the Brennans were cornered animals. Marcus attempted flight, private jet to Cayman Islands, grounded by FBI at Teterboro. Tori vanished, but her credit cards pinged a bus station in Pennsylvania. Sons surrendered voluntarily, hoping for deals. Brandon called from the safe house. "Mom, I'm scared. What happens to me?" "You face consequences," I said, gently but firmly. "Probation, restitution, therapy, but no prison, and no Tori, ever." He sobbed. "I almost destroyed everything, for nothing." "You learned, painfully, But Richard would want you to rebuild. I hung up and turned to Gerald. Christmas Eve dinner, final confrontation, all parties present. He nodded. Police ready, full recording suite, endgame. My allies had multiplied. FBI Vasquez committed her task force. SEC fast-tracked civil penalties. Previous victims pledged civil suits. Brennan's facing $40 million in judgments. Howard Mitchell called personally. Eleanor, Richard built this company on loyalty. We're returning it. Unanimous vote. You permanent CEO. I nearly broke then. Not victory tears. Gratitude. For friends who'd stood firm. For Richard's foresight. For the chance to save my son from himself. As I prepared for the final dinner, table still set for 12, half those chairs empty, I felt the power shift complete. Brennan's desperation peaked. Their threats rebounded. Evidence compounded hourly. The stage was set. Christmas Eve loomed. They walked into the lioness's den thinking they still held cards. They had no idea I'd stacked the entire deck. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear, the kind of winter night where your breath hangs in the air like a ghost. I'd reset the dining room exactly as before. Grandmother's linen, gold-rimmed china, crystal catching the candlelight. But this time, every empty chair felt like a silent accusation. The turkey roasted in the kitchen, mulled wine simmered on the sideboard. Bing Crosby crooned softly from hidden speakers. It looked like a holiday celebration. It was a courtroom. Gerald Montgomery arrived first at 5:30 p.m. Briefcase in hand, nodding approval at the hidden cameras and microphones Patricia had installed under my direction. FBI's listening live from a van 2 blocks away, he confirmed. Vasquez has the arrest team staged at the country club, ready on your signal. I smoothed my black cashmere dress, Richard's favorite, and touched my pearl necklace. Brandon? Secure house with detail, wired up. He'll arrive at 6:15 sharp. Howard Mitchell called at 5:45. Eleanor, the full board's on standby. One word from you, we vote permanent CEO status tonight. Richard's legacy stays yours. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you, Howard, for everything. The doorbell rang at 6:00 p.m. Tori first, alone, red dress clinging like armor, smile brittle as thin ice. Mrs. Hartwell, she said, air-kissing my cheeks. What a beautiful home. Brandon's running late. Family emergency. Of course, I replied mildly, guiding her to the table. Wine? She accepted a glass, eyes darting, assessing. No Marcus. No brothers, no sudden army of relatives. Her fingers tightened around the stem. Brandon arrived at 6:15, pale but composed, the wire hidden under his sweater. He hugged me stiffly, avoiding Tori's eyes. Mom. We sat, 3 at a table for 12, turkey carved, plates passed in strained silence. Tori picked at her food, smile fading. Brandon stared at his plate. I let the tension build, sipping wine like it was just another family dinner. Finally, as dessert plates appeared, Tori cracked. Where's everyone? My family was supposed to join us? I finished gently. They couldn't make it. FBI warrants tend to complicate holiday travel. Her fork clattered against porcelain. Brandon froze. I stood slowly, surveying the empty chairs like evidence exhibits. Victoria, I said calmly. Marcus is in federal custody. Ryan and Jason surrendered yesterday. Your cousin Thomas attempted flight to Canada. Border Patrol has him. Your signal servers are in FBI evidence lockers. Shall I continue? She shoved back from the table, chair screeching. You're bluffing! I pressed the remote on the sideboard. The wall TV flickered to life, live feed from the FBI van outside Marcus's house. Agents in tack gear executing the warrant, Marcus in handcuffs outside his front door, shouting at cameras. Tori's face drained of color. Turn it off! Not yet. I clicked to another feed, her apartment, agents bagging the floor-safe cash, holding up the predated divorce papers. January 15th, wedding day, neatly planned. Brandon stood, voice shaking but firm. Tori, tell me it's not true. She whirled on him, mask shattered. You idiot! Of course it's true. You were the easiest mark yet. Daddy issues, mommy worship, desperate for validation. All I had to do was whisper, "You're better than Richard," and you handed me everything. Brandon recoiled. I loved you. She laughed, ugly and bitter. Love? You were a job, a $65 million job. My father taught me everything: seduction patterns, proxy scams, asset stripping. We've done this 4 times. You're number 4. I let her rage fill the room, cameras capturing every word. Gerald sat stone-faced, documenting. Then I spoke. Victoria, you've just confessed to RICO conspiracy on Federal Wire. Marcus faces 25-40 years. Your brothers, 10-15. You, with the life insurance policy and divorce prep, attempted murder enhancement possible. She lunged for her purse. Brandon blocked her. You're not leaving. Let me go, she shrieked, clawing at him. You spineless... Enough. My voice cut through like a blade. I pulled the thick folder from the sideboard, the complete dossier. Let's review the evidence, piece by piece. First page, signal chats. Marcus's extraction plan projected on screen behind me. Gasps from the hidden FBI feed audio feed. May 14th, I read. Promising target identified, Hartwell Industries. 6 months premeditation. Tori sank into her chair, denial crumbling. You hacked? Warrant, Gerald corrected. Legal. Page 2. Proxy forgeries. Howard Mitchell's real signature beside the fake. Elder fraud. Identity theft. Federal felonies. Brandon whispered. Howard. I lied to him. Page 3. Shell companies. Delaware filings traced to Brennan nominees. Asset stripping. Securities fraud. Tori's eyes darted wildly. I want a lawyer. Gerald slid a card across the table. U.S. Attorney Vasquez awaits your call. Or cooperate now. I flipped to surveillance photos. Tori kissing Derek Castellano. Phone records, 300 texts. The restaurant audio played. Seduce, isolate, extract. You've done this 3 times. Brandon gagged, hand over mouth. 3 times? Other families? Donovan, Henderson, Whitmore, I confirmed. Margaret Donovan's son attempted suicide. Henderson patriarch stroked out. Whitmore lost everything. Sound familiar? Tori lunged again. Gerald blocked her neatly. Lies. Victims' affidavits, I continued, stacking sworn statements. All matching your pattern. Brandon ripped off his sweater, revealing the wire. It's over, Tori. I recorded everything. Marcus threatening me. Your voicemail, the divorce papers. Her eyes bulged. You ratted. You coward. I chose life, he said brokenly. Not prison. The crescendo built. Tori tried every tactic, tears first. Brandon, baby, it was all a misunderstanding. I love you. He turned away. Anger next. You're pathetic, both of you, clinging to a dead man's legacy. Richard built something real, I said quietly. You exploit weakness. Gaslighting final. You're crazy, Eleanor. Senile. Everyone knows it. I pressed play on the board meeting recording. Howard Mitchell's voice. Eleanor Hartwell, permanent CEO, unanimous. Her shoulders slumped. Desperation peaked. Please, I'll disappear. Take the deal. No deal, Gerald said. Prosecution decides. Now the emotional justice speech, the part I'd rehearsed in my head 1,000 times. I stepped closer, voice steady, but laced with 2 years' grief, 6 months' betrayal. You want to know what hurts most, Victoria? Not the money, not even the company. It's that you weaponized love, the purest thing we have. You looked my son in the eyes every day and lied, made him betray his father, his mother, himself. I turned to Brandon, tears falling freely now. And you, my darling boy, I carried you through miscarriages that broke me, raised you alone when Richard traveled, defended you when you fell short, loved you when you hated yourself, and you chose her, chose greed over family, He sobbed openly. "Mom, I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. But here's the truth you both missed." I straightened, steel returning. "Richard saw you coming. The trust conditions, background check, 2-year relationship. You fail spectacularly. I hold veto power. The board stands with me. 1,200 families' livelihoods protected." Tori whispered. "How?" "Richard loved his son, knew his weaknesses, built safeguards." I faced her fully. "You preyed on vulnerability, but vulnerability isn't weakness. It's human. What you did, that's evil." Gerald's phone buzzed. Vasquez. "Arrest teams rolling, ETA 3 minutes." I nodded. "Victoria Brennan, you're under citizen's arrest pending federal custody. Conspiracy to commit securities fraud, elder abuse, identity theft." She screamed incoherently. Brandon stepped back, head bowed. Gerald read her Miranda rights while I pressed the intercom. "Patricia, open the gate." Headlights swept the driveway. 6 FBI agents in tactical vests entered, Vasquez leading. "Victoria Brennan, hands behind your back." Tori fought wildly. 2 agents restrained her. "This isn't over. You'll pay." Vasquez cuffed her efficiently. "Save it for trial. 20+ counts, federal time." They marched her out. She spat at Brandon. "Weak, just like your father said." The door slammed. Silence crashed down. Brandon collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "Mom." "What happens now?" Gerald answered. "Prosecution offers deal. Full cooperation. Testify against Brennan's. Probation, restitution, 500 hours community service." Brandon nodded through tears. "I'll do it. All of it." I knelt beside him, taking his hands, the hands that had nearly destroyed us. "You face consequences, but you're still my son. We'll rebuild, together." Vasquez approached. "Ma'am, cleanest takedown I've seen. Brennan's empire collapses tonight. Previous victims get restitution priority." Howard called as agents cleared out. "Eleanor?" "We watched the feed. Board unanimous. You, permanent CEO. Effective immediately." I hung up, staring at the empty table. Turkey cold. Candles guttering. Garland mocking. Richard's photo watched from the mantel. I'd done it. Protected his legacy. Saved 1,200 jobs. Exacted justice. But the victory tasted bittersweet. My son was scarred. Our family fractured. Trust shattered. Gerald packed his briefcase. Richard would be proud. I looked at Brandon, still shaking. He'd be heartbroken too. Christmas Eve ended not with carols, but flashing lights down the driveway. Tori loaded into a federal SUV. Marcus already en route to lockup. Brennan empire dust. I stood in the doorway as they drove away, snow falling softly. Not satisfaction exactly, not revenge. Justice. Poetic, painful justice. Physical separation complete. Legal consequences locked in, emotional justice delivered, but the real work, rebuilding Brandon, healing myself, that began tomorrow. After the FBI vehicles disappeared down the snowy driveway, Brandon and I sat in silence at the cold Christmas table, the half-eaten turkey mocking us between us. The candles had burned to stubs, wax pooling like tears on the linen. Bing Crosby still crooned faintly from the speakers, "I'll be home for Christmas." And I almost laughed at the irony. Home, but forever changed. Brandon finally spoke, his voice raw from crying. "Mom, what now? Am I going to prison?" I reached across the table and took his hand, cold, trembling, the hand of the boy I'd once bandaged after bicycle falls. No prison, but consequences, yes. The U.S. Attorney offered a deal this morning. Full cooperation, testify against the Brennans, pay full restitution to the shareholders you deceived, 2 years probation, 500 hours community service, mandatory counseling. He nodded, tears spilling again. I deserve worse. Maybe. But Richard, he'd want you to learn from this, become the man he knew you could be. I squeezed his hand. You'll live with me during probation, no salary from the company. Start at the bottom, warehouse assembly line. Earn your way back up. I don't deserve that either. None of us get what we deserve, Brandon. We get what we fight for. Gerald cleared his throat from the doorway. Vasquez just called. Marcus Brennan formally charged. RICO, securities fraud, money laundering. Bail denied. Sons facing 15 years each. Tori, 25 minimum with enhancements. Brandon winced. She'll never forgive me. Good, I said firmly. She doesn't deserve forgiveness. We spent the rest of Christmas Eve cleaning up, literally and figuratively. Brandon helped clear plates, his movements mechanical. I turned off the holiday lights, feeling the weight of 2 years' grief lift slightly, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. Sleep came fitfully. Dreams of Richard, strong arms around me, his voice saying, "You did good, Eleanor. You protected it all." 3 months later, the legal desfecho unfolded like dominoes. January 5th, Connecticut Superior Court granted our injunction. December 28th, agenda voided, all proxies frozen. The board unanimously confirmed me as permanent CEO, no term limit. Howard Mitchell chaired the vote himself, cane tapping the floor for emphasis. Federal cases piled up. Marcus Brennan pled guilty to racketeering, 30 years, no parole until 85. His sons took plea deals, 10 years each. Tori fought hardest, trial set for June, but her relationship coach, Derek, flipped first, testifying for immunity. Previous victims filed civil suits, Brennan's personally liable for $42 million. Margaret Donovan called me personally. "You gave us justice we couldn't afford. Thank you." Brandon testified in February, wired and terrified. Marcus screamed obscenities from the defense table. Tori stared daggers, but Brandon held firm. Every meeting, every lie, every document. Prosecutors called him instrumental. Judge sentenced him to time served, 40 days pretrial, 3 years probation, $1.2 million restitution paid from his frozen trust. He started in the warehouse March 1st. Forklift duty, 12-hour shifts. No VP title, no corner office. Co-workers whispered at first. Brandon the traitor. But he worked, sweated. Apologized personally to Howard Mitchell on his knees in the loading dock. 6 months after Christmas, my new life took shape. I sold the sprawling mansion, too many ghosts, and bought a craftsman cottage near the main factory. 3 bedrooms, porch swing, wildflower garden. Mornings now, coffee on the porch watching sunrise over the assembly lines, workers arriving like clockwork. Hartwell Industries thrived, profits up 24%. I hired a COO, Patricia promoted, launched employee ownership program, Richard's dream realized, pension fund fully protected, therapy helped most. Dr. Ellis, twice weekly. "You've survived widowhood, betrayal, corporate war," she said. "But forgiveness, that's your next battle. Forgive Brandon. Forgive yourself for loving too fiercely, protecting too long." Emotionally, recovery came in waves. Some days, rage at Tori's cruelty. Others, grief for the son I'd lost. Then pride, watching Brandon graduate forklift certification, first solo truckload without supervisor. The antagonist's fate filtered through legal channels. Marcus Brennan died in prison September 2026. Heart attack, irony noted. Sons paroled early for good behavior, banned from corporate work. Tori got 22 years, released at 50. Last I heard, waitressing in Ohio, divorced from her next coach. I don't dwell on them. Consequences found them. 1 year post-Christmas, Brandon knocked on my cottage door, warehouse uniform dusty, hands calloused. "Mom, can we talk?" I poured coffee. He sat, awkward. "I've been reading Dad's journals, the ones in his safe. He wrote about me, struggling, worried I'd never find my way, but he was proud, always." I touched his hand. "He knew your heart. I want to make amends, not just to you, to the company, the people I hurt." He swallowed. Can I try operations again? Bottom rung? I studied him. Older eyes, new lines of responsibility. Earn it. 6 more months warehouse, then we'll talk. He nodded, relieved. Thank you. That night, alone on the porch swing, I reflected on lessons carved into my bones. Betrayal teaches vigilance, but love teaches resilience. I'd underestimated my strength. 68-year-old widow fending off criminals. I'd overestimated Brandon's readiness, but never his potential. To every woman watching who's been underestimated, gaslit, or betrayed, your wisdom is your weapon. Your scars are your armor. Trust your instincts. Gather evidence. Strike when ready. Age doesn't diminish power. It refines it. I've faced death, greed, treachery. Emerged CEO of a thriving company, mother to a prodigal son, guardian of a legacy. Have you faced family betrayal? Wondered if you'd survive? Share below. I read every comment. What would you tell your younger self? If this story strengthened you, hit like. Subscribe for more real stories of women reclaiming power. Comment your thoughts. Where are you watching from tonight? Richard, wherever you are, mission accomplished. The company endures, our son learns. I stand tall. Merry Christmas. Fight well.